And just like that, we're back. I am reviewing Love is Blind, Season 5. This is Part 2. If you didn't catch Part 1, go back and watch it because I am exploring each of the cast's attachment styles. And in this video, I want to go over the actual couples and what I think is going on. And what can you learn from this season of Love is Blind? Welcome to Reality TV Therapy with me, Dr. Diane. Hey, do me a favor if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, but like and comment on these posts because it helps the algorithm. And I'm trying to get more views here and I want to get your feedback. What are you liking about my videos? What do you want more of, less of? Also catch me on Instagram, Back to Love Doc, because I am commenting there all the time. I have other posts. I have a juicy post about Aaliyah and Lydia, and I'd love to get your feedback on Instagram and here. But let's dive into it. I want to talk about the couples that are forming in the pods, what's working, what isn't, why I think some people are going to have a better chance at love than others. Before we get started, I want to talk about something and attachment styles. I'd mentioned it in my previous video that attachment styles, why is it important? It's because you're one way and I'm another, and now we got to figure out how we're going to work. But just for you to know, there's no like hard and fast rule, like if I'm an anxious attachment style or a nervous, I pair better with a nervous. You're going to see that sometimes you feel like, that's my best match. But really it's together about how to form a secure functioning relationship. So the good news about attachment style and why I follow it as a couples therapist is because it doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter if I'm a nervous person to begin with, if you're an avoidant person. And that's my story, if you know anything about it, that I was an anxiously attached person, my husband a little bit avoidant, but we've made it work for 14 years and going strong. So I want to give a little bit of hope before we get into this. If you're watching and going, oh my gosh, there's no hope for me, I can relate to Lydia or Izzy or Milton, I want you to know that the work is there. Go to my website, backtolovedoc.com, take my quiz, figure out who you are, but I also have offerings. I have courses for people, how to become more secure, because there is a formula and I want to help you with that. Okay, let's dive in. Let's talk about what's going on with this couples. Now, another thing is that in the pods, the whole point about the first part, why the pods come before the physical, right, is that we want to have, or at least, well, they do on the show, excuse me, not we. They want to have a deeper emotional connection before the physicality because otherwise this dating world is very superficial. But everyone thinks that vulnerability is the way to go. It's like the gold standard. Be vulnerable with me, share with me. But as I started alluding to in my last video, sometimes it's just too much. So if you are in the dating world and you have been told you're not very vulnerable, I want you to think, or you've been told you're too much, you're too vulnerable. I want you to think about these 3 things. Write them down. These are really helpful. Think of this as like free therapy. I'm on YouTube trying to give you some tools and techniques to use for your own relationships. Okay. When you are vulnerable, and we're going to talk about, because there's all different levels of vulnerability, I want you to think about number 1, pacing and timing of my vulnerability. Because some couples it's going to work for and others it isn't. If it's leading with too much vulnerability without foundation, without roots, it can implode. Okay, so think about when and how you share things in terms of pace and timing. Okay. 2, what you're vulnerable about. Context. It matters. If you watch Love is Blind last season, you know, when Marshall is sharing to Jackie and they both can relate to sort of their traumas, what are you actually talking about? Because it's one thing to be vulnerable about I'm falling for you, and it's another to be vulnerable about my history. And those aren't equally the same. Okay, one is something that happened to you, and another is how you feel about me. Okay, just pay attention to the context, what you share about. And number 3, as I alluded to in my last video, is there a good mix of vulnerability and fun, what I call like light and dark, soft and hard. Make sure you have that, because just too much vulnerability, too much disclosure, without that foundation, without a mix of kind of playfulness or chemistry, as we call it, is going to be tough. Okay, so let's start with the few couples, and I have a surprise couple here at the end I want to talk about. And we're going to talk about all the messy, the triangle. I got you. Let's start with Taylor and PJ. I thought they were like my number one couple. Taylor, sweet butt. PJ, or is he sweet butt? Sweet butt and sweetie, or whatever. They're both sweet. Okay. I thought in the pods, though there's a lot of red, white, and blue, that there was a really nice connection here. Taylor, as the school teacher, I mentioned she probably wants to have kids of her own, which is kind of prompting her to be eager to find a mate. PJ, firefighter, good guy, wants to look out for her. They're talking about like Christmas PJs, and I felt like it was really sweet. But if I just analyze this relationship, and at first I thought PJ was secure, and now I'm thinking not so much. He's had a tough childhood. That this was a good example of a bit of a mix, because there is some vulnerability, but there's also a little bit of fun. But Taylor, if you notice, is doing more of the questioning. And I think PJ has not resolved some of these issues, because when we haven't resolved things, watch this in yourself, you don't bring things up. I have a lot of clients who have some unresolved issues, and they're never going to bring up those unresolved issues because they don't feel comfortable talking about it. But Taylor, on the other hand, seems pretty well grounded, actually, because she's asking, tell me about your childhood. And of course, that's when we run into all of that. So now we're back to the context. So, of course, PJ is going to share with her what's happened in his childhood. And he's not quite so angry now. At least I think that's what he said. But if I were Taylor, and the whole point about this video is you got to think about your audience and how this information is going to land, okay? Because that's a little bit concerning for a partner. My mom was angry, somewhat abusive maybe, to my sisters, and I want to know that I've done my work about this. I've done some therapy about it. I've put that to rest, because we all know that if you don't, these things could show up again and could be recreated. So I love that PJ shared that, but I think I'm not sure if Taylor feels completely comfortable with that information. And I was rooting for them. I still am. We'll see what happens. We don't know. But the reveal to me was not what I would have hoped for. I watched body language carefully, and I thought, PJ kind of rushed in. It was a little bit aggressive on the kissing. Taylor was a little bit taken aback. She did say her heart was racing. I said this was a sign of nervous attachment style. But, the clip right before, I imagine him blonde, tall, good teeth, and then there's the teeth comment. And I'm like, oh, shoot. And you can't blame Taylor. That's what you like. We all have a type. But my question, but then what happened was that weird, awkward silence. It's like, this should be the time where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. There should not barely be a pause. And the awkward pauses felt a little bit weird. Now, there were awkward pauses in the pods too, so I'm not sure if that's atypical for this couple, but to me, it just gave me a little bit of a, not so sure about them. Okay, I'm going to hope that the positive energy that they created in the pods and the connection they did is going to work for them in the real world, but we'll see. I've got a question mark here. Okay, let's talk about our second couple, which I don't know which one's the most controversial, Uche and Aaliyah. I really liked this couple. Not sure where they are now, right? We don't know. We're left on a cliffhanger. But they, to me, were like the new Brett and Tiffany. I thought Uche and Aaliyah, both very attractive people, really accomplished, in their 30s. I had so much hope. And what I had even more hope for is all the unique things they have in common. Like, wow, you love poetry too. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. We like the same favorite movie, and there was something really sweet about that. And the poetry and the art, the nerdiness, and all of that, I thought was just like working beautifully. Aaliyah is a very nurturing nurse. She said, I could use somebody like you to help me kind of promote my business and the entrepreneurial. So all of that was going great until the but, right? The big but. Ugh. And we know what that is. The conversation where, so you're a recent cheater. And they even have the title of it. I'm like, oh, okay. Ouch. And I know that Uche, even watching that back, I'm sure he has regrets about that. He had no idea he was coming across as harsh as he was. But in that moment, and we find out later, right, he got triggered. And what happens when we get triggered, think of your brain like my hand, okay? You have your emotion regulation center, which is the back of your brain stem. Then you have your frontal temporal lobe, which is here. This is your brain. And this goes down to your gut, okay? This is like your polyvagal, all of your nerves that go down to your guttural reaction. When you get triggered, when you have an emotional reaction, boom, what happens is the emotions come out. It's called limbic, flipping your lid, and rational thought goes out the window. Uche was offline at that moment. What does that mean? He wasn't thinking rationally. He was thinking, oh shit, this has happened to me. Somebody's cheated on me. I am trying to do everything I can in this moment to ask all the right questions to vet you. And now you give me this. So he didn't back off, and he should have. I'm sure he knew that she kept saying, well, and Aaliyah, to her point, I was in a relationship for 2 years. I was conveying with my partner what I needed. My needs weren't getting met. And should she have told her partner? I don't know. They weren't going to work out anyway. Of course, I always advocate for honesty, but I think she sort of knew that, and she needed a way out of that relationship. And I said last video, she probably has an anxious attachment style. That's why it was hard for her to be alone. So I just kind of felt for Aaliyah. She's being honest, and no one wants to be judged for their history, right? You want a partner that says, thank you for sharing. And he did. He got there eventually. I just want to make sure that you and I don't have that same dynamic moving forward, right? Okay, so as I said, I kind of thought Uche was getting a bad edit. I think what's most important in all relationships, and you'll know this if you've had a relationship, is the repair. The repair is more important than the fight, okay? And he does a good job. What I loved about Uche's apology is he says, I'm sorry I hurt you, Aaliyah. He doesn't say, I'm sorry, and he doesn't say, I'm sorry, but he doesn't say, I'm sorry if I hurt you. Okay, so that's why I say no if, ands, or buts in your apology. I'm sorry I hurt you. And he did that, and he delivered it. Then what else I loved about Uche's response is that he said, I need to set up an environment where you can trust me. And he took full ownership for this, realizing that she freaked out because she felt that she lost him, and he didn't set up the safety for her. So I felt, as I said in my last video, that he's workable, right? So that's the part to me that gave this couple a little bit of hope. Now, we know at this point, of course, that Aaliyah's left. I'm going to get to that when I talk about her and Lydia. But I actually felt really bad for this couple, and bad because of some stuff with production. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in this with Aaliyah and Uche, and then I want to come back to it because there's more here. Okay, let's talk about Stacy and Izzy. I mentioned, again, my last video, Izzy is an anomaly here. He's the salesman kind of verbal guy. He asks provocative questions, so no wonder lots of women are interested in him. But Stacy and Izzy are an interesting mix, because if Stacy's the secure person that I think she is, and Izzy is the more anxious person, this is actually going to be a really nice pairing. Why? Because Stacy's going to calm Izzy down. And you see that. You kind of see as their relationship is building. And I also said there's a nice mix of like fun and playfulness. And I think this is a really good pace that they're on. Now, interesting enough, Izzy is forming connections with other people too, in particular with Lydia and with Johnie. And these other women, compared to Stacy, are being more vulnerable. But he brings it back to Stacy and says, hey, you're not being as vulnerable. And she says, do you really want someone who's that vulnerable? And she hears it though. She then responds more and gives him more, because he's saying, I need more validation. But we can't create a story, back to context. I can't create a vulnerable context if I haven't had any. I'm not going to make up a story of something horrible that's happened to me. So I don't know how much there is for Stacy to be vulnerable about. But she does share her relationship history. She hadn't been in love in like 4 years or something, a long time. And over time, what's nice about this relationship is the pace. It's building as a relationship should, with a little bit of playfulness and then building on and layering on. And as Izzy says, he feels like this came out of nowhere, when really he's saying, wow, I didn't realize how much I felt for you. And it is because Stacy is building on that. There's something going on here. She's assuring him that he's special. Izzy, her poem, Izzy Wizzy, and it's cute, right? And again, because she's an attractive person, she's a confident person. So Izzy and Stacy, I think we're going to see, because we saw in the previews that there's going to be some, you want me to think you're an F-boy, because Izzy was, as I said, provocative. And now I think he's going to need to pay the piper and assure Stacy that he's not that way otherwise. And then the question is always going to be like lifestyle fit. I don't know if these two really have that lifestyle, so we're going to have to wait and see. Now, my fourth couple is Milton and Lydia. It's an odd pair, okay, to say the least. And not Lydia's first choice. So this one is going to be a tough one for anybody to wrap their head around. But as I said, Milton is young. He's just young. He's 24, 25, even though he feels like an old soul and he's had life and says he's just young. And Lydia is loud and bold and a lot to handle. And I don't have a great, I don't know. Maybe I could be surprised. Now, let's first talk about Lydia and Izzy, because that's a factor here in Milton and her relationship. And then there's Lydia and Uche. Okay, but I didn't think that Izzy was Lydia's guy either. We just have to talk about that relationship, because she's saying, we have so much in common. And there's a moment of connection between Izzy and Lydia where he's talking about not knowing that his biological dad wasn't his dad. And she can kind of relate to that culturally. And there's this nice kind of real conversation and this banter. And I think Lydia's being very supportive. But that's not enough compatibility for everything else. And so Lydia does fall for Izzy because, as I said, he's verbal and they're connecting on that. And she thinks like, wow. But I just don't think there was much more then. So the problem is now Lydia has not one, but two hurts. And she comes to Milton, who says like all the time though, like this, like that. And he's asking her, how can you be so emotional, so expressive? Well, she's a high expressive, emotional type. That's kind of naturally who she is. She says, I'm not putting on any airs. I'm not faking it. But she is who she is. And Milton's kind of like a young Lionel Richie with the hair. He feels a little bit shy. And it also reminds me a little bit of Jessica and Mark. Do you remember from season 1? Because Jessica could not stop talking about how young Mark was. And Lydia, first thing out of the gate, this guy Milton, way too young. That's not for me. But now you're feeling like, is Lydia that desperate? Is she upset because Izzy rejected her, because Uche ultimately rejected her, and now she's going to go for Milton? It feels like a lot of forced issue. And it reminds me a little bit of the Jessica and Mark, because if you didn't see that season, Jessica was really into Barnett. Barnett said no to her, and then it felt like she kept trying to get back with Barnett, and Mark didn't have a chance. And so I'm feeling the same way. Does Lydia really just want to continue her journey? Does she just want the vacation in Mexico or wherever they go this time? And is she really trying to meet Izzy? Is she trying to get back with Uche? So there's a lot of messiness here. And I'm just afraid this doesn't end well, because if I think about all the couples who have made it, there's usually not this kind of love triangle, okay? It's not usually this complicated. It's, again, Brett and Tiffany, Lauren and Cameron. At least from what we see, we don't see all these other relationships happening. So that's why I'm not getting a great feeling about it. The other problem, back to vulnerability with Lydia, is she comes to Milton. They're not talking, Milton and Lydia are not talking about their relationship. She's bringing in context from her relationships. Izzy rejected me. He's consoling her as best he can. Oh, sorry, that's tough. He doesn't know what to say. Then she's coming in, by the way, I have to tell you about Uche. Him and I had this relationship. So now poor Milton, again, has two bombs, right? First, it's the Izzy thing. He's got to be there, listen to everything. And now the Uche. And he is obviously, again, just completely flooded. I got to take a time out. I got to go. He handles himself well, though, pulls himself together and comes back. But can this relationship, again, with not a lot of foundation, can that really survive? And then when we throw in the parents, and we saw a little bit of the clip, right? The parents are questioning what is a 30-year-old doing with a 24-year-old? Everybody's got to ask this. So I would like, a positive ending for both of them, if that means going their separate way. But I'm just not getting a great sense from this. So I'm not feeling great about any of the couples. How about you? Okay, help me out here. All right, let's go to Johnie and Chris. Another one I'm lukewarm on. Okay. But also, because we have to talk about Johnie and Chris, but I want to talk about Johnie and Izzy first. With Chris, I think Johnie was right, that he's nice and he's sweet and he is her safe person. Now, whether she goes for safe or not in the past, her history is really confusing. Okay, I think that Chris, as I said, is probably just a low expressive kind of guy. He doesn't lead with a lot. He's not an Izzy. So no wonder these two, to me, just feels like friendship kind of vibes. They're both doing the spa thing together, and it doesn't feel particularly sexy, or how you might talk about, I would be massaging you. You got to use what you got, which is your voice, and there's none of that. So it all feels just too friendly. Certainly Chris is taken by Johnie, oh, you're an attorney, that's sexy. And she's like, yeah, well, I do paperwork. And Chris really does think that she is sweet and empathic and she would make a great wife, which then, of course, Izzy thinks, oh, well, maybe she would make a great wife. And to me, that's just where we enter into a lot of competitiveness, right? So now, what about Johnie and Izzy? I think to Johnny's detriment, she does say really early on, I don't know the timing, but if it's the first date, I love you. Wow, I love you so soon. Too much. What is the impact of that? Okay, it kind of feels like a love bomb. I'm going to talk more about love bombs, but when I lead with too much and I love yous, you're going to question and doubt me. You don't even know me and you say you love me. I don't know what to do with that. So I feel like with Izzy, it's not going to work because he likes the slow build. He likes to be validated, but it feels out of context. It's too much, too soon. We're back to pacing and timing. Too much, too soon. So that relationship isn't going to even have a chance. So back to now, Johnie's devastated. Izzy breaks up with her, but he was just looking for a reason to, because we get into this whole conversation now where now Johnie is talking about her past, right? That she had been attracted to people with addiction issues. She makes sure that that's not Izzy. Are you? Nope. Okay, let's check that off the list. But then she says, out of a rebound, I marry my husband, though I didn't marry him. I went for the safe person. And then I find out that my addicted ex died, and I took a step back, and that started the whole divorce proceeding. Wow. The context, it's a lot. So Izzy's already, I mean, she doesn't know this, right? But Izzy's already looking for an out because he has a stronger connection with Stacy. And this is just kind of the nail in the coffin. I think that if Johnie had shared the same vulnerable story at a different time, it would have landed differently. I get you want to throw it all out there, play your hand, but how is Izzy, who needs, on his end, he needs validation and support, how is he really going to kind of trust that story? Because her actions are that she's married people she hasn't really loved. You've told me you love me, and I don't know what to believe, okay? And then what makes it even more complicated is that she tells Izzy that Chris is her safe person, and she usually goes for safe, but then she tells Chris that, oh, I don't even know. Okay, I can't keep up. So stories are flipping, as you can see. I'm like, oh my God, where are we? And all of this is just going to backfire because it's too much, too soon. There's no foundation in this couple. And now to go back and say, oh, Chris, I screwed up with you. I really should have gotten with you because you care more. I don't know. Okay. So here's what I would say. If this is you, if you're the Johnie type, you are an anxious person and you sometimes share too much. Here's a little clue. Write this down. We learn in elementary school, in kindergarten, sharing is caring. Share everything. Back to the vulnerability. Share, share, share. But sometimes caring is not sharing. Sometimes it's too much. As I said, the pacing, the context, not thinking of how it's landing on the other person. So that's where this, I don't think, is going to end well either. I know Johnie, at one point we see a clip, is coming back, but I don't know how Chris is going to feel. He, as we saw, took a pause. She did say, I think I screwed up, and he said, I need to think about it. So at this point, who knows? We didn't see any altar scenes. I don't really know if this couple can recover. And remember, you only have one chance at the beginning to make a good first impression, so you kind of got to get it right. Back to be as secure as you can as possible before you enter into these situations, if you ever go on a show like this. And even if you enter into dating. Okay, let's go to my sixth couple, Aaliyah and Lydia. We're not talking about them, but they are a couple. I did a post on Instagram about this, that these two women, more than we've seen before, and before we really get into this love triangle, we have to talk about Aaliyah and Lydia. They're not the mean girls. They're not like Micah and Irina last season. They're joining because they have a lot in common. They both are nerds. They both like science. They're both super smart, but they also like nerdy guys. And no wonder they both like Uche, right? So we're talking about trauma sharing, not trauma bonding. Different things. Trauma sharing is we both share a unique experience that's a little bit traumatic or different or unique. That's what's happening here. Trauma bonding is I would be your abuser and you attach with me in the context of that relationship, and that's not what this is. They are trauma sharing. They're joining with one another. Oh my God, I see you, I get you. You're a hot mamacita. And so at first I thought this is great, right? They're allies for each other. They're women supporting women. Rah, rah, all good. This is great. But here's where we get into the triangle. I call it the love triangle. Now the bomb is dropped. And I just saw an article in Entertainment, and now it's in People magazine too. Chris Cohen, the founder of Love is Blind, he's the main person, wants to come out and first said in an Entertainment magazine that, we don't tell anybody what to say or what to do. It's completely unscripted. We just watch as the drama unfolds. But you have to wonder. I have to wonder, did they know that Lydia and Uche knew each other from before? Because I kind of think they did. Okay. Now, here's what happened according to them, according to People magazine. They said, once we found out that they knew each other, we literally halted production. We took Uche aside. This is in the People magazine article. We took Uche aside and Lydia and said, you guys, we think we're going to pull you because we can't continue on the experiment. It's not fair. And supposedly, both Uche and Lydia said, no, we want to continue because we have formed other connections, which I get, especially Uche, what's happening with Aaliyah. You don't want to get pulled from that, okay? But here's the point where it does feel like production messed with things. They literally said, you cannot tell them. We can't disclose this. And they asked them to keep this a secret. If we're going to let you continue in this experiment, and we know because of UCAN Foundation, and we know there have been lawsuits, that if you leave the experiment early, you also have a financial penalty, $50,000. So that's the really tricky thing. If you are going to continue, you have to keep it secret. Because here's the thing, and really what gets me, if I were Uche and I found out day one or day two that my ex or somebody I dated or whatever slept with was there, I would actually tell my new love interest, hey, by the way, Aaliyah, I just need to let you know that Lydia and I have a history. I don't know where you are in the women's lounge. You women are somewhat similar. You probably are going to connect in some other, but I just want you to know that. And if he had been able to do that, I don't think there would be such a deception. And Aaliyah, who seems like she has slightly better boundaries than Lydia, might have been able to pull back a little bit. But these two women have gotten so joined and become besties so fast that now it feels to Aaliyah like a double betrayal. Okay. So now what happens is Uche tells Aaliyah, I need to tell you about our history. And it's late. It's almost like right before engagements, right? Aaliyah says, I get it. We all have a history. We'll work through this. But I'm going to have to talk to Lydia. And now here's the problem. Lydia, again, has no boundaries. And Aaliyah doesn't want to know and hear that he has a Tesla and a 3-story house and all this other stuff. The point of the experiment is not to know all of these things. And Lydia cannot stop herself. She can't contain it because she's connected in the friendship too. She's getting something from Aaliyah and she is projecting onto her. We're the same people. No wonder this could happen, of course. And then you look back at all the other scenes when she was being supportive of her and you think, well, she knew, right? She knew about Uche because she dated Uche. So it just sort of colors everything and you don't know what's the truth here. But it leaves a bad taste. And it leaves me, the viewer, with a really bad taste that the producers have gone for drama over love. I'm just going to put it out there. That's how I feel. And I'd heard, because again, I know some people from previous seasons, that they thought that season 4 was too much love, not enough drama. Okay, so what do we have though? Now we have all these relationships that are now fragile because of this. Uche and Aaliyah, Lydia and Milton, because of this triangle. I'm not sure how they should have handled it, but I really think if you say we don't interfere, then why they had to keep the secret. That's the problem that I have. It was going to come out. You know you're going to, if nothing else, you're going to be at this reunion and the vacation spot and you're all going to have to say, I had a relationship with them. And then what? I mean, we know there's footage. You can't really lie. So I just think that asking them to keep the secret was the problem. Let me know what you think. I don't know how else. I've also heard, by the way, this is not the first time this has happened. I've heard from somebody else. And let's think about it. It's a small city. Even if you're in Chicago or Atlanta or Seattle, Houston, it could happen that you run into someone in the pods, but I think it's all how it's handled. Okay, let me land this plane. All right, let's talk about it. What do we have? We've got Taylor and JP, awkward reveal. Not so sure about them. We've got Uche and Aaliyah. Aaliyah's left. Can Uche talk her back into coming? Is she going to have to cut ties with Lydia? I don't know. We've got Stacy and Izzy. I don't know. Is Stacy going to feel like Izzy matches her lifestyle? Is she going to feel like he's changed his ways? Don't know. We've got Milton and Lydia. I don't see it with the age gap. And then we've got Johnie and Chris. Chris, I don't know if he's going to come back. That would feel like he'd really have to change his mind on it. So I'm just not really feeling it. And I'm feeling like, okay, you got your drama. Maybe that's going to get people to watch 4 more episodes. But if we can't get really invested in these couples, then I don't think it's a great production choice. I just don't. I think it could have been handled differently. Of course, I'm going to watch because I want to see. And maybe, just maybe, something will happen where I'll have a better feeling about these couples. That somehow one of these couples will pull it together. But at this point, I'm not feeling it. Let me know on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? 10 would be great. 1 is horrible. I don't know. Maybe I'm a 5. Let me know what your number is. But let's stay tuned. It's next Friday, and I've got lots more content coming, because if you watch The Bachelor, we've got Bachelor in Paradise. We've got The Golden Bachelor coming up. Both of those happening on Thursday. I'm going to be late because I am going to be traveling, but I'll be back on Friday catching all of this. Lots of content coming. Subscribe to my channel. Let me know what you think. Is love blind? I think love is friggin' messy, and messier this season than ever. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.